I'm going to try to do this afternoon is to essentially present to you from, at least from the perspective of the German Academic Council, what is required to be a university professor here in Germany after your PhD. And I also try to share my own personal journey, okay? The image I have here, actually, I put this up because the topic, which this image tries to describe was quite instrumental to my becoming a professor. So as you already mentioned, my background is in material science and engineering. I've done a lot of work in the field of, fracture mechanics and, the development of residual stresses in engineering and materials. And one of my big fascinations is actually why materials fail. So what makes a material break? And I used non-destructive methods to do very fundamental work in this field. So for my today's presentation, I'll try to at least define who a German professor is, so what people expect of a German professor, essentially. I will give an overview of the workflow from PhD to professorship and highlight some of the mechanisms that would get you from your PhD to your professorship, and what it's like to be an African PhD holder here in Germany. And of course, I'll share my journey to professorship. So typically, when you hear that this person is a professor here in Germany, it comes with a lot of responsibility, actually. Not just responsibility onto your students and the university, but to the society at large. And from a professional point of view, there are a few things that are expected of you. So you're expected to show high level of research on the very high ethical standards. This is what the community expects of you. They expect you to be innovative in your teaching environment, in your transfer of knowledge from wherever to your students. You're expected to be able to reach out across all the disciplines, bring in ideas coming from other walks of life in your research work. You're expected to, have some kind of an international visibility. This is what is expected today of a German professor. You should be international in nature. You should have spent time overseas, either on sabbatical or on short research stays. And from a humanistic point of view, they expect you also to exercise equal opportunity in, your professional duties. The expectation is that your focus is on excellence. Your focus is on performance and not on favoritism of any form, really. So if a candidate or if a situation requires that excellence is exercised, whatever it takes to make things come out excellently well, that is what is expected of you as a university professor in Germany. And you're also expected to be productive. Yeah. So the publications you made 5 years ago isn't what you should constantly be working on. They expect to find improvements in the nature of what you do. They expect you to essentially bring your ideas to the classroom and not just everything in the textbook. A certain level of originality and novelty is expected of you. You're expected also to exercise management responsibilities, especially towards your staff. And it's not just making sure that they at work at 7:30 or at 8 in the morning, and they leave at 4:30 or 3:30 every day. They expect you to have an insight into what's going on in the lives of some of the people you're mentoring or the people you supervise. Essentially, you should be in a position to watch their back. That's it. It is expected of you. And you need to also be, of course, active in the management of the university's academic affairs. Yeah, you need to be able to set exams. You need to be able to, supervise exams. You need to be able to invigilate. You need to be able to, record those exams. You need to be able to make sure that the quality of exams that are being provided to the student community is of the highest level. These are expected of you because your exams, even though you're a full university professor, your exams are still reviewed, not just by peers, but also by the students as well. You're expected to be supportive of new talents within the university. So, I mean, in your day-to-day encounter with the students, you would always identify those students that have exceptional talents or students that are undergoing all kinds of challenges. You are expected to intervene and see how to either remedy the situation or give those students that have exceptional talents the opportunity to use those talents to develop society. And mentoring, of course, mentoring is a critical aspect of what you do as a university professor here in Germany. The mentoring responsibility goes as far as even suggesting where each of your graduate students would end up. I remember as a PhD student, we had one of the big professors back then at Max Planck, and part of what he did was making sure that all his PhD students had positions either in universities or the big companies in the Stuttgart area. He made it his responsibility. Essentially, he calls a meeting and says, you're going to Bosch, you're going to Siemens, you're going to the university. That is the expectation of you as a professor within the German university. And of course, you need to be able to seek for and manage funding to advance research and improve resources. This is expected of you. So funding of not just the research you do, but also research that is being carried out within any of the collaborative networks or collaborative projects that you're a part of. You're expected to seek funding for those research work. And it can be a tedious process, but the pressure is there for you to basically check all these boxes because the system is watching you. It's a fact. Yeah. Good. Now, still on the profile of a university professor. So you probably know that in Germany, we have three categories of professors. We have the W1 professor, the W2 professor, and the W3 professor. This didn't used to be this way until 2002, when there was a review of the, as we call it in Germany, the Hochschule Gesetz, where the C1 or the C2, C3 professorship methods were converted to the W1, W2, W3, where also the younger scientists or the younger academic members were given an opportunity to find themselves on academic tracks. The W1 professor today, this is what you would describe as an assistant professor or a junior professor, as the case may be. And these systems differ from each German state. So the path and the speed with which you actually get to either become a W1 or W2 or W3 professor is defined by the state where the university is located. Okay. Good. So the W1 professor would typically be a junior professor, and this oftentimes comes either with or without a tenure. The expectation is that you get this this appointment. Remember, professorships are appointment here in Germany. You don't take exams to become a professor. You are appointed a professor. So this appointment typically would come within the first 6 years after your PhD. Then you can become a W1 professor. And right after that post, you're not expected to become a professor in the same university. The system requires that you move on to a different university to either become a W2 or a W3 professor, as the case may be. The W2 professor, normally they have a tenure, they have a fixed term, and these are associates, and the W2 professor, you must not necessarily move on to become a W3 professor. Of course, that will be your ambition to be a full university professor, but an associate professor is already a well-respected position here in Germany. You're a group leader, you either an academician, or you provide oversight over even budgetary aspects of what's going on, either within your research group or within the institute. So it's a really respected position, I would say. And of course, the highest position you can attain within a German university environment is a full professorship or a full university professorship. And it's a position that comes with a lot of responsibilities, responsibilities defined by the research work you do, your teaching methods, your know-how in terms of your field of specialization, the authority you command within your peer group, and of course your international visibility. All of these come together to define whether you make a full university professorship or not. Okay. Good. And I just want to point out that normally within a German university, the W2 and W3 professors are civil servants. So you're graded as a civil servant, you are an employee of the state. Your responsibilities are far-reaching. I mean, technically, as a university professor, the law allows you to even conduct a civil wedding, so to say. So it's a lot of responsibility you have, and the system also takes time to make sure that that appointment is earned somehow. Okay. So the typical workflow would be that you finish your PhD. I already had the earlier discussions we had today where the timeline of a PhD is a bit contentious, whether you spend a 5-year or 3-year PhD. I did mine in 3 years, and for the same reason which our first speaker today had to finish it, I had the same reason. So my funding would have been cut off after 3 years, and there was a need to speed up my research work and make sure that I wasn't left without funding at some point. So upon concluding your PhD work, there are 2 things you can do, actually 3 of them. One of them is that you finish a PhD and you don't have a job. This is very, very likely. You never rule out such a possibility that we have PhD holders here in this country that for all kinds of reasons, they still haven't been able to secure a job. But the typical thing is that you finish a PhD, you go into the university and start your academic career there, or you go into industry as either a research staff or a management staff or a technical staff within an industrial establishment. Then once you get into university, typically start off with a postdoc. You spend time essentially working on topics which will move forward the field of work where you are in. The topics are mainly defined by either a funding body or a foundation, or by your supervisor, your professor. Yeah, and part of your responsibilities typically would include, of course, doing research on all kinds of topics, assisting the professor with some of his student-based tasks and responsibilities, and attending conferences, presenting at conferences, helping organize conferences. It essentially is a preparation period for you to know how to run an academic show, basically. And then right after your postdoc, the pressure starts mounting for you to get onto something else. We've had cases where there are people doing postdoc and the postdoc seems to extend. So it's just one postdoc after the other. And I mean, the system doesn't frown at it, but it's expected, of course, that when you hire somebody to do a postdoc, and this postdoc is still being done 10 years post PhD, then you start asking questions as a supervisor. What I expect, of course, would be that your supervisor sits down with you and trying to determine together with you how to move your career to the next level. Okay, and so typically from postdoc you become an assistant professor. You have your V1 status, so to say, or W1 status, or you go on to do habilitation. Habilitation used to be very predominant within the German academic environment until the early 2000s, precisely in 2002, where the rules for becoming a professor or having a habilitation before you become a university professor, those rules were significantly relaxed. The habilitation process is almost like a second PhD, because you actually graded based on publications. You're graded based on essentially you take an exam, I would say. So you sit for an exam as though you're defending a PhD, and then you have your habilitation when that is successfully done. From your postdoc, the university might also absorb you as a docent, a lecturer, or Wissenschaftler Mitarbeiter, or researcher, and you essentially you're an assistant to the big professor in the institute or on campus, and your responsibilities in all cases, whether as a junior professor, as somebody involved in habilitation, or you are a Wissenschaftler Mitarbeiter or lecturer, researcher, your responsibilities, of course, includes assisting your professor. So everything an assistant professor would be doing is what you'll be doing. As I already mentioned, it's a grooming time. It's a time where you're being groomed to be able to take on much higher academic responsibilities or responsibilities within an academic environment. And then, of course, depending on your efficiency as an assistant professor, there might be openings in the same university where you are a professor, and then you apply and and then you become an associate, or there might be openings in other universities, and then you move on to those other universities. The system is structured in such a way that you're encouraged to move on to another university to earn your W2 or your W3 professorship. Now you become an associate professor, essentially have almost equal responsibilities as a full university professor, except that your input in the governance of the university as a legal entity is subdued, I would say. So all university full professors have direct input in the governance of the university. The associate professors, of course, have, so to say, the highest academic role to play, role in terms of interaction with the students, role in terms of building the research architecture within the university, role in terms of coming up with new research path, research ideas, research directions. You have a lot of role to play here as an associate professor. And then there really is no timeline between when you make full professorship after you become an associate. All of this is driven by, I don't want to say coincidence, but is driven by opportunity. So those opportunities could be internally created, where there's a retiring professor within the institute, and the collegial heads of the institute or the university sit down and they feel that you are in a position to occupy that post, and they run the idea by you. A public announcement is made that the there's an opening for full professorship in this institute or in this university, and you apply together with other members of the public. And of course, in the evaluation process, oftentimes um, the um, yeah, the evaluation process is weighted in your favor, essentially, if you're already within the university track. Yeah. And then I also want to point out that those PhD students that, or those PhD holders that decide to go into industry also have a chance to become professors, in Germany at least. And there are two ways you can do that. One, you could spend a few years in industry and decide to go into university and start your career as an early um, career starter on campus. So you start off with either a postdoc or with a post of an assistant professor as a junior professor, straight from industry. This is possible. Um, or you can become an associate professor. What we've seen historically, at least in Germany, is that the PhD holders that go straight from industry to academia oftentimes join our universities of applied science, as we call them. So you probably know that here in Germany, we have two university-based systems. We have the traditional university where there's a lot of emphasis on research. There's a lot of emphasis on essentially scientific novelty or academic novelty. And then we have universities of applied science where the emphasis is on the practical nature of what we do in industry. So when you go into the University of Applied Science as a university professor, the burden is on you to transfer all that industrial experience, to bring that experience to the classroom, essentially. And the funding that is required to push that forward is provided on the basis that you'll be building this particular competence on campus, a competence that is straight from the core of industry. Okay, good. So in essence, this is what the workflow from PhD to professorship looks like. Now, the mechanisms from PhD to professorship comes in three forms. One, of course, is driven by your teaching experience, your research experience, and your ability to network within the community, within the academic community, that is. In terms of teaching, of course, a lot of innovation is expected in your teaching practice or your teaching experience. The students will evaluate you. Yeah. So in most German universities, the students are given an opportunity to evaluate not just the course, but also the manager of the course. In this case, the professor who is in charge of this course. So you are also evaluated. And the outcome of that evaluation is taken seriously by the university. Also, you're expected, as I already mentioned, to bring in some creativity and innovation in your lectures. So the students shouldn't find your lectures boring. They expect you to be as creative as possible when you stand before them to share knowledge with them. Research. One way that, or one of the indexes that the university looks into before you become a professor, and this is something you have to work on yourself, is to essentially, come up with not just loads of publication, but good publications as well. So the number of publication counts and where those articles are being published, or those works are being published, is also quite important. If you have hundreds of publications in quote, third or second rated journals, it is important, but with just a few publications in Nature or in Physical Review or in Science, that already attracts a lot of positive attention for you as as an upcoming professor or an aspiring professor. And of course, as I already mentioned, the novelty of work you do, if you're able to drive your research work to the point where it results in the production of a patent or patents, that works greatly in your favor. It allows you, even as an assistant professor, to aspire for full professorial openings in other universities, jumping the W2 status, that is. These are all possible. And of course, your ability to attract funding to the university. This is critical because funding is required to expand on the activities of the university. You know, the university needs funding to be able to attract more students, to improve on the labs, to buy new equipment, to do all kinds of things that would drive forward the activities of the university. And if you're in any way able to bring that component into university administration, it's already enough for the system to consider you for full university professorship. And then networking, very, very important that you look for a mentor. Even at my stage, I still have a mentor. Mentorship is important, and never shy away from the fact that you can still learn something from either an older colleague or even a younger colleague whom you have a deep respect for. Find a mentor. It is important. Yeah, they interrogate your thoughts. They give you direction. They also open up opportunities for you, especially in academia. You need to work on your visibility. You need to be able to attend as many conferences as you can, appear in seminars, be part of workshops, organize those workshops yourself, and be active on campus. This is, it's not a must, but it's a big plus, really. I know that a lot of us coming from Africa who find ourselves on campus, we tend to shy away from certain university-based events, but it would greatly help if you can be as visible as possible on campus, either within the student community or within the academic community. Okay. Good. So now you're an African in Germany and you have your PhD and you're thinking about professorship. It is something which it looks as if the energy required to overcome that barrier could be quite high. But I can tell you that if you keep your mind to it and be on the very good lookout for opportunities that will get you into that class of academics, then take it and don't look back. So one of the things that could actually get you to that point, apart from research, apart from teaching, apart from networking, is your personal development. I've already heard today where some of our speakers today have talked about the role of the German language. It is important. It really is important that at least you're able to, hold some kind of a conversational German. It must not be perfect, but it has to be decent at least. Okay. And you need an understanding of the German culture. You need to, know what the, some of the social skills are. What is a taboo? How do you navigate, within the social structure here? And your colleagues really have to see you as making an attempt to integrate within the German society, because part of that part of the responsibility that comes from being a professor is also the integration aspect of it, the social integration aspect of it. I mean, you as an individual, you need to be able to show grit. You need to be able to, carry yourself with a certain level of integrity and perseverance as well. You need to be prepared to go the extra mile. I recall that the first speaker today already mentioned that sometimes it's not the smartest person or the most intelligent that goes on to become get a PhD. It's those that are able to persevere, to hang in there, and basically want it so badly that you're prepared to keep up late at night to do what's needed to reach your goal. And so it is with being a university professor. You need to be able to work hard at it, really, really work hard at it, especially as an African. You have to work hard at it because, this is a fact. When we're on campus and you're pursuing a PhD, or you're already working as a scientific staff or an academic staff on campus, it's an unusual position to occupy as an African in a German university. It really is an unusual, and the expectations could be quite high. The first impression oftentimes is, that people are, not quite sure about your ability to perform under this academic environment, whether you have the mental stamina to, to drive through the academic work. And you do have it. That's why you're able to earn your PhD. So already being a career academic, that quality in you needs to be honed somehow. You need to develop it further, and you need to consciously work on developing it. Most of us Africans here in Germany, we arrive here already speaking English, and I can tell you it's a critical asset for you as an African within the academic environment in Germany. We have a German academic community that is working very hard. They have a lot of information to share with the global academic world. And one of the barriers against that sharing of information is English language. So, and then you come in with your background or your pedigree as an English speaker. It's an opportunity for you to insert yourself into a difficult environment and show yourself as dependable to be able to carry out the task of producing producing literature that is described in very good English language. So your English language proficiency is an asset which you should project strongly as an academic within the German academic system. And you need to also exercise a willingness to take up tasks. Yeah, it's important, very, very important. I don't want to say that the young Europeans we have on campus are lazy. No. But they are not prepared to do certain things simply because they don't want to. It's an opportunity for you, without trying to make anybody look bad, but it's an opportunity for you to step in and basically, take up that role which people are reluctant to take up. Okay. And again, attending academic workshops, you need to really start preparing yourself for as a qualified teacher, as a qualified professor. Most of the university campuses, they have workshops and seminars, or thought building as we call them, where they provide all kinds of enlightenment and teaching programs on how to become a good lecturer, how to structure a lecture, how to prepare lectures, how to deliver academic information or scientific information. Those programs and workshops are advertised on all kinds of portals, either online or posted on the relevant offices. You need to go out there and consciously try to be part of these programs. Typically, at the end of such programs, you get a certificate, and these certificates count when you start submitting your documentation for professorship. Okay, good. So my journey to professorship. Part of the responsibilities I had, I just want to say, when I finished my PhD, I was single, of course. After my first year as in postdoc, I got married. So, and The family grew. It just wasn't me. I now had my wife and a child, and so there was a lot of burden to to handle, so to say. And coupled to that burden, you had to mentor undergraduates and postgraduates. You basically had to be there for your supervisor or whoever your professor is. You need to um, he doesn't have to second guess your reliability in any way. You need to be there to teach. You need to be there to supervise academic thesis work. You need to manage all the practical sessions, of course, together with other colleagues that are either doing PhD or doing their postdoc. But you need to be there. You need to be present in the group. You need to be present in the institute, giving tutorials. You need to attend teacher development courses. These are things I had to do. I had a publication rate of roughly 9 peer-reviewed articles per year, and I had to basically leave my wife and child and attend conferences all over the world. I was prepared to do it, not only because it was fun to do it, because I also knew that it was a necessity to be able to polish up my resume. I was working in an institute where we ran a consulting firm. The consulting firm was founded by the head of the institute, and you had the different W3 professors as co-chairs within that consulting institute, but the postdocs did the work. So we did the work, we did the experiments, we did the reporting, and I was part of that. As part of my primary work, I also helped in the setting up and developing of workstations at national labs where I had to go to do all kinds of measurements or use facilities. And as I already mentioned, it was quite clear that when I came into the institute, the man who became my boss and my mentor, he had enough confidence in my ability to express myself well in English language that essentially every article that either came directly from him or any of his other PhD students, I had to read them. Even if I'm not a co-author, I had to read them to read it to make sure that the ideas being expressed were effectively expressed. I was part of an X-ray group, X-ray diffraction group, and my job was to basically make sure that all the machines were running. If there are broken parts, I had to go through the procurements of broken parts and all. For me, it was all training, and these were not things in my job description, but I took them up because somebody had to do them. And my core research area, I made sure that, I mean, it's a relatively big area, but I just took a small portion of it and made sure that I distinguished myself in that field. So I had to be a reference point in the institute for this area of work. And that was important, very, very important. So essentially, it is a lot of work to do from your postdoc period to the point where you actually become a professor, as either a W2 or a W3 professor. And it took me 6 years to do this. It's a I would say relatively short time. When you think about the average time it takes from your PhD to becoming a full professor in Germany, it's somewhere between 10 years and 15 years before you become a full professor. And the average age of full professors or professorships here in Germany is between 40 and 42 years. And I mean, the ability to be able to get yourself to this point is oftentimes also driven by the expectation your colleagues have of you as an African. It is a fact, as an African on campus, there is a burden on you. There's a burden on you to constantly prove that you can do that. Now, I just give you a very brief personal story of how I actually then became a professor. One day, my supervisor, who is now one of the vice presidents at the KIT, called me and said, you've been with me for 5 years now, and I am so pleased with the work you've done here. I think it's time for us to find something else for you to do. I don't want to drive you away from this institute. If you want to stay longer, but I think you've matured enough for you to find something else. So this was in December of 2008. And in January 2009, he calls me and says, I've just come back from the German university in Cairo. This university is co-funded by the state of Baden-Württemberg, and I've had to go there on behalf of the state of Baden-Württemberg to help them run an accreditation of the Faculty of Material Science and Engineering. And while I was there, the president of that university asked me to please find a good material scientist for him to help set up this faculty. And I had you in mind. Is this something you want to do? I said, okay, I'm going to think about it. So I go home, discuss this with my wife. I said, that would mean we'll have to leave Germany. She said, fine, if that's what you want to do, then let's do it. And so that's how I one day packed up my load and left Germany for the German university in Cairo. The chair I was occupying there was funded by the state of Baden-Württemberg. The deal they had was a certain proportion of the faculty at that university had to come from Germany at least. And after 5 years, I decided to come back to Germany. I decided also to leave university full-time to do something else which I felt I had the energy to do. My colleagues, of course, were very disappointed that I left university full-time. But upon getting back to Germany, since I came back to Germany, I've had 2 other professorships here in Germany. My message to you is that whatever it takes for you to chase your dream, if that dream is to become the director of Siemens, you can do it. If that dream is to become a professor in any of the German universities here, you can do it. You just need to, stand firm, do what needs to be done, work harder than any other person. It comes with a great sacrifice, but you can do it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Brando Okolo. That was really very insightful for me. I'm sure for many others here as well. My question is regarding your own path to professorship. So you did not do the habilitation, right? So how, if that is correct, then what process did you take to become a professor? And this also means that I would like to know more about the alternative pathway of becoming a professor apart from habilitation. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I already mentioned, the Hochschule Gazette got changed in the year 2002. And that rule or that law does not require you to have your habilitation before you become a full university professor. In my case, when I went for the interview for my professorship, the interviewer said to me, oh, you don't have a habilitation, but your scientific records, your publication records already mirrors that of a full professor. There's going to be an internal discussion and people will get back to you. A week after that, I received a message from my then boss. He says, oh, can you come over to the office? I need to speak with you. I went to his office. He says, I've just been called by a head of a professorship committee. He's based in the University of Stuttgart. And he wants to know about you. I said, what does he want to know? He said, he wants to know if you're qualified to be a full university professor. I said, what did you say? I said, yes, you are. And that was it. And that's how I became a professor.
Just to add to that, so this was when you returned back from Egypt, right? Or
no. Before I left for Egypt, so I was still working as an assistant professor, basically, here in Germany.
Okay, thanks.
We have a question in the chat box from Judith. I am curious on advantages of pursuing industry postdoc and becoming fully immersed in corporate world, as opposed to pursuing professorship. Okay, maybe she needs an advice.
Yeah, well, I have to say that sometimes when I I as an individual, when I think about you know, even the journey to get my PhD, it's not something I ever set out to do as an undergrad. I never thought myself, I never for once thought that I'll end up on campus. When I think about it, I sometimes think that I actually got a PhD for my dad and coincidentally became a professor just for him, basically. So for you to, um, or rather for me, my mind has always been in going into industry and actually, you know, running this race as an entrepreneur, which is actually what I'm doing now. And right after your PhD, if you go into industry, with the knowledge and the discipline you have as a PhD holder, you get into industry with the expectation that you would help your employer to you know, essentially have either a technological competitive edge in their market space. This is required of you, and oftentimes the employer provides you with all the tools and all the resources for you to, you know, keep them ahead of the curve, as I say. It can be quite demanding, and it can be at the same time very fulfilling. My advice normally would be, if you have your PhD and you've resolved that the, you know, academic work is not for you, that, you know, going into industry is for you, whichever industry you get into, try as much as possible to you know, understand some of the processes within the firm or the company where you're working. And your dream really should be to break out one day and run your own show yourself. This is what I expect of any PhD holder who goes into industry. Your dream really should be, I have learned enough, and I think that I have the tool sets to run my own show at some point. I also have to mention this as a general, you know, advice to all of us. Whatever it is we're doing, please don't forget Africa. Africa needs us more than ever. You know, even when you become a professor here, that journey from postdoc to professorship, please factor Africa in everything you're doing. Try and, you know, build up all kinds of collaborative networks that would help Africa move forward. If you're going into industry, whatever it is you're doing, try and see where there will be opportunities to move Africa forward. Thank you.